So let's start. Welcome, everybody, to our event. We are the Intercultural Communication Intersection. So you organize many events, and this is one of them. My name is Daniela Silva, and I'm the co-chair with Amina Dwiri of the Intercultural Communication Interest section. And we are very happy to have Dr. Savio Siqueira with us today and all of you around the world. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. Here is 11 a.m., 11:03 a.m., but I know that in Brazil, in Brasilia, in other parts of Brazil, it's 2 or 3, and some places are morning, some places in afternoon, some places at night. So thanks so much for joining us today. Change it here. So you might be wondering, if you don't know us, what do we do? So we're part of the TISO International organization, and we seek to collaborate with TISO professionals to advance intercultural communication and understanding through communication, English language education. Our mission is to cultivate a critical and reflective discussion on culture studies and interculturality within English language teaching and learning. So as I said before, we organize many events, and webinars is one of them. So today we are hosting a webinar, but also we organize practice-focused webinars. There's more practice oriented, also informal coffee hours. That is an opportunity for us to discuss, relevant topics in our profession, but in a very informal conversation. We organized academic panels during the TISO convention. We have also lightning talks where you promote research in progress, usually in progress. So speakers, they have between 5 to 10 minutes to discuss the research. We have a newsletter, and if you want to submit, articles, lesson plans, also you're welcome to do that, and many more. So one way for you to know what you're doing and contribute to the discussions that we help to organize is one, first of all, is to be part of the TISO International Association. And also you can be part of, join us on our social media outlets, from Facebook, LinkedIn, X, YouTube. You post our videos from our webinars and our events over there, so you can check it out in case you miss it. And also, if you're part of the association, you can see our posts on my TISO. So if you want to contribute to the next newsletter, so the deadline is at the end of this month, right? Deadline is on January 20th, 90th. And you can send us an email if you have questions and if you want to learn more about it. Let's start. So I just want to introduce Dr. Savio Siqueira. If you don't know him, he holds the position of associate professor of English and Applied Linguistics at Bahia Federal University, also known as UFBA, in Brazil. He possesses a PhD in linguistics from the same institution and serves as a productivity researcher with Brazil's National Council for Scientific and Technological Development, also known as a CNPq. Additionally, he's a member of UNESCO's Chair on Public Policies of Multilingualism. As the leader of the ELF Brazil and UFBA research group, he conducted postdoctoral studies at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, in Hawaii, in the United States. So Dr. Siqueira has supervised MA and PhD candidates in the programs both in Brazil and abroad, and has published extensively, particularly in the fields of ELF, known as English as lingua franca, and teacher education, critical pedagogy, language education, and interculturality, among others. So his most recent publication is co-authored with Alessia Kogel and Graham Crooks, and is titled English for a Critical Mind, Language Pedagogy for Social Justice. And I'm going to share the link to the book in the chat. So during the presentation, if you have any questions, just post them in the chat, and I can collect the questions, and you can address them at the end of the presentation. Okay, so Dr. Siqueira, the floor is yours, and we're very happy to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Daniela. Can you hear me okay? My sound is fine?
Yes.
Okay, so, well, first of all, it's afternoon here. I'm based in Salvador, Brazil, and it's 2 p.m., 2 something. So then it's a pleasure to be here with us, with this group. And I have to thank Dr. Amina also for inviting me for this. Actually, I see this as a, let's say, a talk among friends and colleagues. So, and it's really a pleasure, and it's good to see here new faces, but also familiar faces. And wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So, when Dr. Amina invited me to do this talk, I immediately thought of what I've been doing currently, because I was a TESOLer for a long time, but then it's been some time since I haven't been to, to conferences. But of course, I follow more or less what's going on in the TESOL area. But I'm more involved currently, more involved with teacher education, English teacher education, especially as a Global South scholar. So then my focus of enunciation here is a global scholar in a teacher educated, basically dedicating time to what we call critical language pedagogy in English as a lingua franca. So of course, a lot of the of the discussions that I'm trying to bring here, so they might apply differently in terms of context. So then let me share what I prepared. I usually prepare more than the time allows me to, but can you see?
Yes.
So, all right, the title of the presentation is Critical Language Pedagogy in English as a Lingua Franca, exploring the potential of this dialogue to decolonize ELT. So why I chose this topic? Because it has to do with, as I said, my current research, and also because I see that when with the advent of the concept of English as a lingua franca, we need to rethink in many ways how we do our practices, and also what we bring behind in terms of ideology concerning ELT. So despite the fact that we cannot erase historical facts, so I'm going to share. Is it moving, Daniela?
Yes.
So this is my the roadmap I prepared. So I'm going to have a quick warm up, I hope. Then I'm going to, for those who are not very familiar with some concepts, I'm going to define terms like CLP, ELF, and I'm going to add the concept of decoloniality, because they are to work together from my perspective. And then why decolonize in ELT? So then I'm going to explore, the idea of having these concepts in dialogue. And then I'm going to focus, of course, we can go into different directions, but I'm going to focus on, as I said, on something that I have been working on in the last 20 years, especially teacher education as catalyst for this dialogue to take place, and concluding words. So to warm up, I selected a few quotes from an article that I came across some time ago in The Guardian by a guy called Gazzola. And this is just for us to, to begin our conversation. So first, I would like to bring here a quote by Robert Phillipson, who wrote the book Linguistic Imperialism, when he says, the British Empire has given way to the empire of English, or the English Empire has given way to the empire of English. So then in this article, this author says, as a result of the colonial enterprise, of course, English became an official and co-official language in many countries of the world. And where the empire spread, so too did English. And then he brings a few, let's say, some information that I find very interesting for us to, to reflect upon here. He says that the emergence of English as today's predominant global language is seen by many as a positive phenomenon with several practical advantages and no downside. However, it also raises problems that are slowly beginning to be understood and studied and, in my view, potentially challenged. So one thing that he calls attention is that the most important challenge is that of fairness or linguistic justice, or injustice if you prefer. So people who learn English as a second language, for instance, incur learning costs, while native speakers can communicate with the world without incurring such costs. So then we, in different parts of the world, of let's say the non-native speaking world, spend a lot of money to learn English. For example, Western European countries spend between 5 to 15% of their education budget on foreign language teaching. In the European Union only, and I would say in the world, most of these resources go to the teaching of a single language, English. And on the contrary, in English-speaking countries, by contrast, foreign language teaching has been in decline because younger generations feel less need to learn other people's language because, of course, if they, speak English, so why would they be interested in learning other languages, right? So that's why he puts this into the perspective of linguistic injustice, let's say. And then I would add this for us, just to start the conversation. So based on these facts, I make a few questions here. It isn't about time to question and challenge this enduring state of affairs. In other words, isn't it about time to have this neo-colonial bubble burst? And then I use exactly the illustration that is in the article. So the process is long, the industry is powerful, the monolingual mentality and arrogance are strong, but we can start from two fronts. So promoting and enforcing multilingualism and engaging in ways to decolonize ELT. So then, of course, I'm going to concentrate, even though multilingualism is in the backdrop of my discussion. So, and then I would present critical language pedagogy and English as a lingua franca in line with decolonial studies, especially the concept of decoloniality, as a way to at least challenge, or follow this whole idea of trying to decolonize ELT and enforce multilingualism. And this is basically a global South perspective. So, defining the terms, even though in the title I mentioned English as a lingua franca and critical language pedagogy, I'm adding, because in the backdrop of my research is what we have called decolonial studies, and especially the concept of decoloniality. Very briefly, I'm going to bring a few definitions, some more, let's say, simply known, and some others more, let's say, expanded in some discussion. So let's begin with lingua franca. So world languages are not just a modern phenomenon. They are at least as old as world empires, global trade routes, and proselytizing religions. The term lingua franca is normally used to mean a contact language. There is a vehicular language between speakers who do not share a first language. It is important to remember, and this author makes this point, A lingua franca is a language of convenience. When it ceases to be convenient, however widespread it has been, it will be dropped without ceremony, with little emotion. So, and then I'm moving to the definition of English as a lingua franca, which is very different from, let's say, English as a foreign language. I highlight here, for example, communication in English between speakers of different first languages, the discourse produced in interactions involving speakers of different languages, any use of English among speakers of different first languages and lingua culture backgrounds. But I bring a more, let's say, a more expanded definitions. So, English as a lingua franca is a social, emergent, variable, translingual, and power-mediated communicative practice where English resources are used among speakers with different lingua cultural repertoires. So also we define it as the way multilinguals use English in real life outside the classroom for their own purposes, and a non-neutral transcultural arena of struggle and resistance, placing emphasis on its critical and political nature. And this is more or less the track I'm going to follow here. It is, I brought this quote because I think it gives some direction here. ELF as a phenomenon has always been multilingual. When English is used as a lingua franca, it becomes less foreign, but also less English and closer to other languages because of the cross-linguistic and translinguistic influences of the resources in the user's repertoire in their sociolinguistic contexts. And then I'm putting this with critical language pedagogy, defining very, very briefly and very openly. Critical language, or CLP, refers to teaching languages for social justice in ways that support the development of active, critical, and engaged citizens. The application of critical pedagogy ideas. So, and of course, when we talk about critical pedagogy, Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator, comes to the front, and principles to the teaching of additional languages. Under CLP, language is to embrace an alternative worldview and serve above all as a potential site of resistance. CLP is strongly opposed to teachers telling students what to do or think. So we go more for negotiation. CLP puts the students in active roles within the pedagogical process. And then I list here, and then this you can find in the book that Daniela mentioned that we just published. And I had the pleasure of writing this book with my colleague Alessia Kogo and Graham Crooks from the University of Hawaii. So, and then I just listed here some key features related to critical language pedagogy and how, it really marries together with the concept of English as a lingua franca from my perspective. So we talk about critical needs analysis. So what do students need English for in each specific context? Participatory materials development, so students at least can give input into the development of materials. Negotiated classroom management, the teacher assumes a problem-posing role in a facilitating role. So we foster an inquiry perspective in which the teacher may learn along with the students. A focus on practical issues, real-world content and realia, development of critical thinking about real-world problems, issues relevant to students' realities, and participatory assessment. Of course, unfortunately, time would not allow us to explore each of these features, but I can, if we need, we can expand a little bit. So then, the concept of decoloniality. This is, of course, I don't think it's new to the group of people here, but it's always interesting to contextualize because, as I said, as a Global South scholar, that's what has been orienting a lot of my work today. So very briefly, we have moved from global colonialism to global coloniality. And it's important to remember, especially us, Brazilians, and some other, let's say, people that were born in countries that were colonized. So we are at the same time product and producers of coloniality. And what is coloniality? So then we have these two terms under the decolonial studies. Coloniality is the long-standing patterns of power that emerged as a result of colonialism. Coloniality is maintained alive in books, in common sense, in cultural patterns, the self-image of peoples, how they see themselves, in aspirations of self, etc., etc. And then decoloniality would be the concept to contrast. So it is particularly strong in Latin America. It aims to delink from knowledge hierarchies and ways of being in the world in order to enable other forms of existence on Earth. In order to engage in an epistemic reconstitution of ways of thinking, of languages, ways of life, and of being in the world. So also in order to struggle for a more symmetrical North-South dialogue. Because if you're familiar with a concept of abyssal line by Sousa Santos, the Portuguese scholar, so then this dialogue, this North-South dialogue, global North-South, has always been very asymmetrical. So, and then I would say that in their expansions, both CLP and ELF are to be taken as potential arenas of decoloniality. So then, decolonial thinkers propose to acknowledge and legitimize what we call the polycentric and pluriversal nature of knowledge. So instead of having just one type of knowledge that is legitimized, so we go for this polycentric and pluriversal nature of knowledge. But it's important, according to this scholar, Brazilian scholar, Menezes de Souza, when he says we need to engage in three movements within any decolonial attitude. Decoloniality or decolonial, so we're not talking about a method. It has to do with attitude or a gesture. So then for us to deal with that, we need to identify coloniality, we need to interrogate coloniality, and finally interrupt coloniality. And of course, this has to come from us, educators, teachers, etc., etc. One cannot denounce coloniality if one is not able to identify and interrogate it from the inside out. So, and then when we put all this together, and then I make this question: why decolonizing ELT? It's my area of work. That's where I've been working with teachers. I've been teaching English, this very powerful language, for many years. So then, and of course, why we need to think about all this, and then bringing support from these, let's say, theoretical orientations. So first of all, as Penny Cook would say, there are deep and indissoluble links between the practices, theories, and contexts of ELT and the history of colonialism. So, and we know that ELT pedagogical practices and perspectives, EFL, ESL, etc., are solely based on research and theories originating from the global north, and they are sold by a very powerful industry. And in many ways, people incorporate a lot of their, let's say, ideological concepts, etc., methodological, without filtering. And then such perspectives have historically been ethnocentric, culturally elitist, ideological, arrogant, dominant native speaker oriented. It's not only any native speaker, because we see, for example, usually the native speaker models are, so they are pre-selected. A critical, in many situations, depending on, for example, especially materials, racist. And just, I highlighted ideological, arrogant, just for us to, I brought here a very quick example from a book where it's a reading exercise to practice, comparatives and superlatives. And then it was a very popular course book, published in 1998. And then there is this example with the figure of Bill Gates. Very quickly, Bill Gates is the richest private citizen in the world. There is nothing he can't afford. Every morning when his alarm clock goes off, the software tycoon is $20 million richer than when he went to bed. So there are thousands of examples in textbooks where, this arrogant ideology, this whole idea of a success, etc., is propagated, and a non-critical teacher would probably concentrate basically on the grammar point, which is, here illustrated comparatives and superlatives. So the question remains, why decolonize in ELT? So then I brought here two quotes, one from Penny Cook and one from Rajagopalan, my colleague from Brazil. And first, because there are many ways in which the current spread of English teaching methods and textbooks can be seen as a recapitulation, if not an intensification of neo-colonial relations. The conjuncture between ELT and colonialism has had long-lasting effects on the theories, practices, and beliefs of ELT. From classroom practices to beliefs about the cultural makeup of our students, many aspects of ELT reproduce cultural constructs of colonialism. And then on a more practical view, Rajagopalan says, because ELT practices that have been long in place need to be reviewed drastically with a view to addressing the new set of challenges being thrown at us by the phenomenon of English as a lingua franca, even though he uses the concept of world English. Up until now, a good deal of our taken for granted ELT practices have been threatened with the prospect of being declared obsolete for the simple reason that they do not take into account some of the most significant characteristics of English as a lingua franca. So then, of course, I'm not saying that we should throw everything away, but when we look at English as this global lingua franca, denationalized, so a lot of changes need to be operated. So why decolonize in ELT again? And then in very practical terms, the majority, and then it's something that I get very interested in related to materials. I just brought a couple of examples here. The majority of course books used for English instruction have been sanitized to make them politically and socially harmless for an international audience. So, and then of course, a lot of these books concentrate on stereotypical information, cultural, mainstream cultural aspects, etc., etc. So, and then I have this quote here by Penny Cook when he says, many ESL textbooks still work with the 1970 Kellogg's Cornflakes vision of the family, a blonde, white, heterosexual family with one daughter and one son. All of them clearly visit the dentist regularly. And I took this picture from a real textbook. This is what Prodromou, the Greek scholar, some years ago, or many years ago, called the plastic world of textbooks. And we explored this. And then I have been, doing a lot of research on this, trying to deconstruct the plastic world of ELT textbooks. Okay, having said that, so my proposal here is to put all these three concepts and orientations and attitudes together to decolonize ELT. So how I see this, how I see these concepts in dialogue. So a few things here. From critical and transformative lenses, ELF and CLP share important points of contact. ELF turns to be taken as an empowering enterprise that helps teachers make sense of their agency throughout everyday practice. When taught and learned in different contexts, English must be seen from a critical perspective, challenging, for instance, its common, utilitarian, commercial, and apolitical, over-methodologized historical tradition. So we know that in many ways, I have a colleague here that says, if we cannot use Esperanto as the global lingua franca, we try to Esperantize, let's in quotes, English. It's important to talk about power in this whole discussion. So power is a crucial element in both areas and is to be used in favor of all who speak the language, not only the supposedly, owners of the language, thus in favor of social justice and people's well-being, confronting different types of gatekeeping and exclusivity. An integration between CLP and ELF enforces the possibility of our having ELT classes in which students make use of real-world language, considering and valuing its diversity. So bring diversity to class and being attentive to the possibilities it generates in the production of discourses and counter discourses. So then we are to explore the potential contribution that CLP and ELF studies can offer to what we call agendas of decoloniality sought in English language education, especially here in our area, in the Global South. We've been doing this, trying to set up agendas for decoloniality in English language education. So this dialogue can contribute for ELT and any additional language education to take place on different grounds. So what I'm saying is that the proposal is not basically, okay, let's throw away the water bath, the bath water with the baby, but to rethink a lot of what has been part of this whole process. More specifically, and then I'm going to funnel into teacher education, the CLP-ELF interplay has great potential to ensure the process of rethinking and reformulating ELT practices at different levels, especially teacher education. And I'm going to concentrate here on teacher education, of course, English teacher education. Therefore, teacher education should be considered a crucial front in the construction and implementation of this dialogue and what will result from it. When I refer to critical education, I involve both processes, so pre-service and in-service. So, and then I see teacher education in this interplay, teacher education as catalyst. So CLP holds a strong emancipatory and empowering facet that needs to be incorporated into the regular ELT classroom. So CLP and ELF, can join forces towards the decolonization of English and consequently of ELT practices. Thinking of Paulo Freire and also his critical pedagogy, bringing to the center the concept of conscientization linked with ideals of empowerment, liberation, autonomy, equity, social justice. And very, very specifically in the classroom. So move away from native speaker normativity, raising awareness to diversity, so the diversity of English, focusing on successful communication, working on pragmatics, and also the abilities for people to be able to communicate, critically assessing materials, working on more democratic, inclusive, and innovative assessment systems. And this would probably help lead teachers and teacher educators into thinking and doing ELT otherwise. Just as an example of this integration, I'm not going to discuss this because this is part of our book, but we do have a whole section in part A, and then I have a few examples here of this integrating CLP and ELF. So with different activities, especially involving some of those characteristics that I mentioned before. So this is in the book, English for a Critical Mind. Then thinking of teacher education as catalyst, I see myself as a teacher educator that is always learning and unlearning and relearning. So then I would propose teacher education as a space exactly for learning, unlearning, and relearning, so as to educate teachers who are able, and then I list a few things here, and of course this list can go on and on, but I just highlighted a few things in the thinking of these three concepts of CLP, ELF, and decoloniality. So teachers who are able, pre-service teachers or in-service teachers, able to recognize their practices as political with consequences beyond the classroom. So the teacher not as a simply operator of a system, but someone who really sees herself or himself as an educator. Embrace epistemic pluralism, engage in epistemic struggles that confront social, cultural, and linguistic hegemonies. Reflect and act on the types of knowledge to be privileged in the classroom. Provincialize global North frames of knowledge. So questioning, filtering, bringing new, frames of knowledge. Question and reject monoglossic ideologies. Decolonize beliefs, attitudes, concepts, pedagogical practices, curricula, methodologies, assessment systems, outdated teacher education programs, materials, imprinting a critical situated local view. I also see that courses at the university, and then I always have this I look at my context and say that we also as teacher educators, we need to work to follow this whole line of thought. Teachers who are able to minimize the choice of neutral themes devoid of social relevance, privileging real-world issues, topics to be addressed in class. It means to deconstruct this plastic world of textbooks. As for ELF specifically, articulate it to the critical and political nature of language, power relations, and the connection between subject, identity, culture, translingual practices, multilingualism, etc., able to decenter ELF from hegemonic irradiating spaces. So this whole idea of still concentrating on American English, British English, or let's say stereotypical American English, stereotypical in the, let's say, dominant standard. Making room to other voices, often the unheard and neglected voices, and who are able to give access to a plurality of research works and outcomes, mainly locally based, and inspire teachers and students to carry out. And then I revisited this article by a Korean professor when she brings she plays with the word TESOL. And since we are in a TESOL group, I thought it would be very interesting. So she invites us to look at ourselves from a SOL perspective, so speakers of other languages. So to carry out TESOL from a SOL perspective. And finally, I'm coming to the end. So I brought here two quotes. One, when I look at this whole discussion and then investigating critical, let's say, scholars, and then there is a question here by Donald Macedo from the Boston University that I think it's interesting for us to reflect upon, and also one from Shin. Macedo asks us, how can a field decolonize itself and at the same time justify its vast whiteness as reflected in classrooms, teacher preparation programs and materials, and national and international language teaching organizations such as TEFL, TESOL, AAAL, among others? So this is, a question that makes us, is here to provoke us. And then, as I said, I brought this quote from Shin because as I said, when we think and rethink our practices, there is always room for us to reflect and add new perspectives. And then I like when she says we need to, especially us who are SOLs, right, speakers of other languages. So from a SOL perspective, we may recreate English in a third space, not as a neo-colonial language, but as a shared language, to talk about colonialism and resistance to it. In doing so, we can reestablish TESOL as a field where Ts, so teachers of English, and then she refers to the ones who are basically native speakers of English, and the SOLs, so collaborate to teach. And then she changes, she says, to teach English to speakers of our languages. And in many ways, this goes together with the enforcement of multilingualism and of course, multiculturalism. To conclude, I would like to state that it is important to point out that this whole process of unlearning and relearning implies, in particular, the destabilization of our own comfort zones, teachers, teacher educators, all stakeholders involved in ELT, in or language, foreign language education or additional language education, thus envisioning our engagement with different ways of thinking, teaching, valuing, and producing knowledge. Those who feel like this may restart the journey by questioning their own assumptions, interrogating their beliefs and knowledge, checking to what extent they are implicated in several of these issues, and what can be done personally and professionally to decolonize their practices and do TESOL/ELT otherwise. Obrigado, thank you. And here we have my references. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Siqueira. That's awesome.
I hope I can, sorry, oh, we still have time.
It was
Thank you.
perfect. Good timing. So does anybody have any questions? I don't see any in the chat. I have a question. It's more like based
Yes.
on your experience with pre-service teachers,
Uh-huh.
and I know that Brazilian society has, absorbed a lot of American culture, right? Through
Yes.
music, through
Mm-hmm.
movies.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what the reception from the students are when introduced this idea of decoloniality in the
Uh-huh.
classroom. Do they accept that? Like at first, do they resist? Yeah, just could you share a little bit of
Uh-huh.
experience with the
Well,
Brazilian
I
service teachers?
uh-huh. I tell you that for pre-service teachers, the resistance is almost zero. But in service teachers, we have more resistance because they're more used to that, especially the ones who work in English language institutes and also private institutions. But I would say my pre-service teachers, so they actually we because from an interdisciplinary point of view, we've been discussing decolonial studies in different disciplines, in like applied linguistics and some other disciplines. And then when they come to us, they find a lot of they see it makes a lot of sense because they start reflecting, differently from when they were students of English. And a lot of them, when they come to the university, they don't know a lot of English, but the ones who speak English, they learned English in private institutions. And then, of course, these private institutions, especially what we call English courses, they are very much into native speaker model oriented American English, more in our area, more American English than British English. So then the reception is really good. Among in-service teachers, I would say things have been changing a lot. So they sometimes, when we talk about English as a lingua franca, and we refer to several of these tenets that in many ways are liberatory to them, say, especially when it comes to interlanguage, accent, identity. So these are terms that they are getting more and more used to, and the resistance, I think, is not as much as it used to be when I began discussing. So then I tell my students, Daniela, that usually nowadays when they finish their course, they are much better prepared than myself when I left my course. I would consider myself an excellent teacher, but a practitioner. So because at that time, I didn't have access to all these new discussions, especially from a critical perspective. So then I learned by doing in my career. And then when we bring this to to teacher education at an early stage, so they feel they are very receptive. And of course, there are institutional, let's say, situations here where, let's say EFL, English as a foreign language, is still very strong. But resistance probably I would say that one group of stakeholders that is very resistant are parents. So especially in private institutions. So they, this whole idea of, speaking like a native, American English, standard English. So this is still very strong. But in terms of, I would say, pre-service teachers, they've been very receptive and doing a great job. And we have, Professor Kleber here, who's also works with English in decolonial studies. And we know that it's easily to see that these new teachers, despite the fact that they do know English, but they are extremely receptive to all these discussions. So then, in hopefully, this is a body of knowledge that is making sense to a lot of them here. Kleber, would you like to say something?
I'd like to listen to you more about this. Well, I really appreciate your talk, Savio. It's an honor for me, for your group, to learn with you. And I consider it so important to have this conversation about the colonial perspective, because unfortunately, especially in Brazilian context, it's so common to have a colonial perspective in our course, especially in the language teacher education, isn't it? And I believe that's necessary to transform our mind, to transform our curriculum, and to do this, it is, to rescue the perspective of Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire, Paulo Freire was my mentor, my professor at the University of Campinas, and he taught me that it's necessary, to rescue the history of our students, to have the colonial perspective, and to modify our praxeology. It's necessary to modify our mind. I'd like to listen more about
No,
this.
yeah, you're absolutely right. And for us, Cleve, we are very lucky because we are very familiar with Paulo Freire's work. And of course, a lot of his books were translated into English and he's worked in different parts of the world. One thing that is very important is to establish this dialogue and you know me in how I treasure to share and to listen and also to hear from my colleagues, because of course different places, different realities, different perspectives, but in openness to this whole discussion, I think it's extremely important. And I remember, for example, at the beginning I said that I haven't been to, I was more, let's say, I would frequent more TESOL conferences and also I've been to a couple of AAA conferences. And I remember that basically the discussions were very much into teaching and sometimes hard linguistics. And then I see that these discussions have been advancing in TESOL conferences and also publications in different parts of the world. And I believe that our work in the global South, and just to make sure, I'm sure everybody knows that, but when we call global South, we're not talking about geographically only. So then there are many global South scholars in the south of Europe doing great work concerning ELF and also CLP, teacher education. So then I think this exchange of knowledge and see these discussions penetrating, let's say, more traditional spaces, it makes me feel very happy and helpful and hopeful. Thank you.
Good. I see that Enrique has a question, then Ramin and Bob.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead, Enrique.
I think there is one question here on the chat.
Yes,
I think
from
that's
Enrique.
probably my question.
Yes.
Thank you, Doctor, for a very interesting talk. I really appreciate your time and sharing all this with us. And what I posted on the chat group is if there are any concrete experiences or projects that are being developed or that have been developed at your university that you could share with us in terms of decolonizing ELT, so that we can, sort of have an example to, set by other people, that we can probably follow here.
Enrique, let's say, thank you for your question, but anyway, let's say something very much into the topic decolonizing ELT. I don't think we have a specific project only on this. It is a very current topic in, for example, in my research work.
Yeah.
And I have a group called ELF Made in Brazil, or ELF UFBA slash, ELF Brazil slash UFBA, where I have, for example, students and also PhD candidates, MA candidates doing research. And then, of course, decolonizing ELT, I have published different texts and also articles on this, but touching different aspects like teacher education, materials, working, but I'm very interested into, let's say, what I call attitudes, and also how people in their beliefs. So then, of course, I can let's say, suggest several articles and book chapters for you to have a look at. But we've been discussing, for example, back in 2018, we had the publication of our national curriculum, and this national curriculum established English as the only mandatory foreign language or additional language in basic education. And there has been a very heated discussion because in many ways we would see this as a neo-colonization. So it was actually, English was one of them, so it was optional. But of course we know that the majority of people would go for English, but then nowadays our national curriculum imposes English as the mandatory one. And then also in the same curriculum also elected English as a lingua franca, so dumped English as a foreign language and brought the concept of English as a lingua franca, but the implications were very vague. So then we have been working exactly on that, how to implement in a country that is a continent with different needs, different let's say cultural backgrounds. Let's say English, under a lingua franca perspective. So then I can, we have, let's say, micro projects, if you prefer. So, and then I would say several of them imply ELT decolonization. But I myself have been working a lot on the profile of the teacher. So in order to have, Paulo Freire would say that we don't educate people, people educate themselves. So then I see myself as opening doors and windows to my future colleagues, so my student teachers, in order to prepare them to be able to, as we saw there in one of the slides, to be active in their teaching and being critical. But of course, depending a lot on the different, let's say, situations the person would be involved in. But in terms of a big project to show you, I don't think we have, but micro projects like PhD research or other initiatives we do have. I myself working with currently I'm working on I'm working with the pre-service and in-service teachers, and working exactly with the national curriculum, English as a lingua franca, and decolonial studies. And decolonizing ELT is one of the issues to be addressed. So I can send you more information on that.
Thank you very much, Dr.
you.
for your answer.
You.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ramin has a question too.
Yes.
Hey, thank you so much, Savio. It was such a pleasure to hear you. And it's, you know, they say you don't have to preach to the choir, but I think you do have to preach to the choir, right? Because it reinforces things, it reminds us of things, and it just kind of reinvigorates, right? Ideas. And,
Thank you.
And so I appreciate that. Thank you for being our preacher here today. One thing that I think you touched on a little bit at your last comment there, and addresses one of the previous question about like resistance, you know, to this approach from students or from, you know, teachers or pre-service teachers. Another aspect is that, you know, ministries, right? Ministries of education who are often responsible for making decisions on what textbooks, you know, what curriculum will be used regionally or nationally. And so I just think it's so important also to consider them as an audience of you know, explaining these concepts, providing this kind of rationale and these perspectives, and also aligning them with an understanding that it actually does meet, you know, these objectives of like critical thinking, right? Analysis, and also, you know, and inclusion of national kind of like identities, right, and local identities, and these kinds of things too. So I just face that in my work as being someone who's been involved in helping to select national like textbooks to be used nationally in curriculum, and so I think that's important for practitioners who are involved in that kind of work, and also, you know, how can we frame it in a way that ministries of education can understand and then can integrate, you know, in their textbook selection. So thank you again.
Thank you, Ramin. This is a great comment, and then I hope I can briefly tell you more or less what happens in Brazil. You're absolutely right. I think teachers need to participate, and of course we have a Minister of Education in this. You know, that's when I mentioned the national curriculum. So there is a lot of controversy and discussion. So, and we're still debating over this, especially because, first of all, it decided for us that English would be the only mandatory language, eliminating the possibility of people really going for Spanish, for example, which is absolutely paradoxical. In Brazil, we are surrounded by a Hispanic world. And of course, when there was a law that, you know, imposed Spanish, at least in high school, and then when this new curriculum was published, so it simply suspended the law. So, and then what happened? A lot of schools that they had to hire Spanish teachers, they fired them because people simply wouldn't be interested. So they were not supposed to offer, only if they wanted. But anyway, so then the Ministry of Education, when it comes to textbooks, we've been improving a lot here. We have locally produced books, and every 2 years we have evaluations, national evaluations involving not only usually professors from the public universities, the federal public universities, that are controlled by the Ministry of Education, and you know, public school teachers, so really practitioners. So then we formed this group of people to evaluate the new collections that we have like a call for new collections, and then this call is very long, many pages, and there are many requirements. And fortunately, since 2009, the first when we call this the textbook national program in Brazil, and then there were always offers to other disciplines, but not foreign language. And then in 2009 we had English and Spanish. So, and then since day one, since this first year, I participated as a consultant. And we could see that the requirement for the books to be accepted, they were much better and also much more, let's say, culturally sensitive, socially sensitive than international collections, let's say. So then, for example, there was a lot of, I would say, it was very much impregnated with all these issues related to critical pedagogy, social realities, for example, different family structures. So, and then the guidance would say that if, for example, if the book brought issues that could be taken as stereotypical, discriminatory, racist, etc., so the book would not be approved or even selected for evaluation. So then, when these books are approved, so it goes through this whole screening involving university teachers and also public school teachers. And then once the book is approved by the Ministry of Education, so they offer the different collections to the schools. And we do expect the teachers, at the very end, to participate in the selection, because we don't have perfect books, right? So they always have gaps. But I would say that if we compare the content and the requirements in terms of social issues and cultural issues, these books they are at an advantage compared to international collections, because the public is different. So then we do enforce the idea for teachers in the local areas to participate in the selection when the Ministry of Education offers the pre-selected ones. So then you're right, absolutely. So then we should involve teachers with this critical view, because they are the ones who are going to, as we'd say, operate the system.
Thank you. Yeah, and Barbara has a question too.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
For your talk and a lot of ideas. And of course, you mentioned Boaventura de Sousa Santos, that I had the pleasure of listening to him in Portugal during a conference. And I remember his ideas that, of course, when you challenge, okay, he named this patriarchal, okay, mainly patriarchal view, okay. Of course, the so-called minorities or minor views, okay, should kind of, link among each other. For example, of course, I come from Europe, from Italy, and we are slowly kind of putting in our practice the ideas of both multiculturalism as well as multilingualism. For example, I also know recently that, for example, Finland changed its own curriculum in favor of the immigrants, okay, and of the languages these immigrants brought with them. But of course, it's a very slow process. And on the contrary, okay, for example, I can cite the phenomenon that many teachers still don't want to include in their own teaching practice the politically non-correct views or non-neutral views, okay? I think that you have a lot of, imbalance somehow between phenomena, but also a lot of counter ideas. And I would like, for example, another thought, and then I stop, okay, is of course that we have the potential, of course, of digital, okay, nearness, of digital exchanges. And I would like to know from you if, apart from this, okay, what else, okay, could, the different views in different parts of the world, be it, of course, from the global south, but sometimes also from the global north, okay, how can we, let them know more of each other, let them connect more?
This is a great question, and thank you. Of course, Barbara, actually, we have, first of all, as I said, we have to be open to, when Boaventura de Sousa Santos talks about colonialism, patriarchy, and also the abyssal line, right? So then remember when he says that, on one side we have what we call the metropolitan world, On the other side, we have the colonial world. So I think we, in my view, we global South scholars, we are not, we cannot wait for the global North to come and say, hey, what are you offering us? Actually, we need to be with you. But again, it's trying to show what we've been doing. And of course, as you said, the virtual world can help a lot. So, and that's what we're doing here. So there are several people here that I don't know. And then now I got to know, and of course we can interact. So then these exchanges are extremely important, but there has to be openness on both sides, you see? So it's difficult, for example, I'm going to give a practical example. So the virtual world has been helping shrink the world and also helping us in the global South, because sometimes we are discussing, for example, when we have international conferences, if they are located in the United States or in Europe. So for us, it has always been more difficult because of distance, because of costs. And then what happens? We see basically, Europe doing their work together, interacting a little bit, depending on the topic, with the American academics, and in the United States. For example, for me, just for you to have an idea, for me to get a visa to the United States, I don't have a consulate in Brazil. If I want to go to AAAL or TESOL Quarterly or TESOL Conference, I have to get a visa in another city. I have to apply, like nowadays, at least 3 months ahead of time. Pay, I'm not sure how much now, at least $250. And then I have to buy an airline ticket to go to the city. I have to go for an interview. This is just to get a visa. So, and then, of course, Europe, things are a little better, and we've been interacting, but things, basically for us to continue this interaction, we have to be open. So in my view, it's just like joining forces. So getting together because this whole, I don't know if you're familiar with the Cassius circles, when he talks about expanding circle, inner circle, outer circle. So now not actually since the beginning, we know that we have global South realities in Germany, we have global South realities in Italy. And despite the fact that we are in the North or in the South, so a lot of things go together. We have more or less the same needs so then I think we need to be open to these discussions and be, let's say, for example, in our ELF conferences, Kurt Kohn is here. We develop a very, very positive environment in terms of exchanging ideas, trying to understand different realities and, incorporate or get to know what our colleagues are doing. But again, as Boaventura brings, when he talks about the abyssal line, being the metropolitan world historically has been more comfortable than being in what he calls the colonial world. But again, we should not be here just playing, the poor guy. We have to go and start working, interacting. And I would believe that these virtual exchanges help a lot. So then, because we get to know, and I'm sure that, especially nowadays, Latin America, because of decolonial studies, we have been working in different areas, and people are interested in that. So then, what we have to do is to be open. That's my opinion. So,
thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have already passed all time, but I see that you mentioned Kurt, and Kurt has a question. So maybe, Kurt, can you
Yes,
make a
and
comment
there's a
shortly,
question
because I
by
already passed all time. I want to be
There's a question by
respectful.
Nicole here that I'd like to answer if possible.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank
Kurt.
you very much, Savio. Many thanks for a most interesting and stimulating talk. Well, I mean, just very briefly, virtual exchange. I know Savio. I mean, we know each other through virtual exchange.
Yes.
So what a pity. Had there been no virtual exchange possible, we would never have come well into contact with each other and our exchanges. Now, Savio, you know that my obsession is somehow with standard English or some kind of standard English, and my orientation certainly is towards standard English, some kind of standard English, and I would argue that for all of our colleagues here in this conference, in this meeting, their orientation is and has been and still is towards some kind of standard English. And it seems to me kind of the elephant in the room here regarding decolonizing English. Is it essential for decolonizing English to drop our orientation to some kind of standard English?
No, thank you for bringing this, Kurt. No, it's not. So, because basically we know that to a certain extent, we have to know what we have to understand that informal, for example, as teachers of English, when we are in the classroom, there has to be some formality. So, of course, depending on the needs of your students, this is my opinion. I do not ban standard from the classroom. What I would say is that along with standard, we can expand this, let's say, the concept of standard. We can, for example, my students, they know standard, but they know, for example, when it comes, for example, Nicole is talking here about pronunciation. They know, I try to show to them that there is a standard, either American standard or British standard, but there are other ways of pronouncing the same sound according to, let's say, the person's, multilingual repertoire or first language, whatever. So the decolonizing ELT, in my view, is not basically throwing out everything, Kurt, or just say standard has to be banned. No, it's to think especially beyond linguistic issues. So, for example, when I standard will be there, but what bothers me with standard is that people look at standard as the only, so as from a gatekeeping point of view, you see? So then it's to teach standard, because we are going to need standard, especially, for example, in my case, I'm preparing students to become teachers. How can I simply drop standard? I can't. But I can, in many ways, show to them that they can be very open to diversity. So diversity when it comes to phonology, diversity when it comes to, phonetics, when it comes to lexicon, etc., etc. So, but standard will always be there. The only thing is that we should, we should debunk this sacred, this holy position of standard, you see? And then instead of being the elephant in the room, could be, something lighter. You see my point?
Yeah, right. And I agree. In a way, it can be very simple. I mean, obviously my orientation is towards some kind of standard English. You clearly hear that I have a German background, so my accent is German. And all the others have their backgrounds.
Yes.
And this does not result from having been taught to speak like a German speaker of English, or to speak, having been taught to speak like a Brazilian speaker of English. But this is what we did, in the old days, despite this strict focus on standard English. This is the way learning a language works. I can only develop my English.
Sure.
And maybe an essential or an important part of decolonizing English is to accept, pedagogically accept what learners do with the English they are exposed to.
Yes,
So when
yes,
I am
absolutely.
exposed to some kind of standard English, well, I do something with it, and what comes out of it is different from what went in.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
input
No,
and output, this whole thing. And I
absolutely. I
think
think.
this is yeah.
No, I think you're right. You're right. Absolutely. So that's why I said we should not simply say that, okay, let's simply throw away everything. So, and then you know that I really like your idea of my English, which is true. And I remember, for example, when talking to my students, they would say, Savio, whenever I come into the classroom, so when my students, the first day of class, ask me which English do I speak, so their expectation is basically American English or British English, this stereotypical. And then I usually say I speak my English. So then to many of them, they just get puzzled. But this is true. That's absolutely true. So then I think decolonizing, it goes beyond linguistic features also, Kurt. But it doesn't mean that we have to simply dump everything. That's the point. That's why I wrote that article, EFL working with ELF, remember? So with this idea, so, but I think it makes us students and teachers, let's say, more flexible in terms of their beliefs and how, and also their practices. But I agree with you. Thank you.
Well, I want to be respectful of people's time. So, Savio, would you be able to share your email in the chat
Sure.
in
At
case
the
people
end,
have questions and let's see that Ademar has a question. Maybe Ademar can send you
yes,
a
please.
question and you can reply to him if anybody else has any question. I would like to thank you all for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have Savio here and all of you in this event as well. And follow our social media for future events. And that's it. Okay, thanks so much. I hope you all have a beautiful day. And it was been a pleasure having all of you here today with us and discussing this very important topic.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Great discussion.
Thank you
Thanks so
very
much.
much.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.